DPRK Dock and Hotbox, hell yeah.
Welcome to Leaping Larry's Revolutionary Reading Theatre.
Hey, it's reading time. And today we are working on the next part of Joseph Stalin's Foundations of Leninism. We're on Chapter 3, Theory. If you ever want to get access to our other reads that we've done, including previous parts of this same read, you can get it both on this channel here on Twitch, right here under Video tab. Live reading is the first thing that's basically on the list. You can see all our previous readings here. You can also get my readings on my YouTube channel as well, the J Gang YouTube channel, which you can find very easily by just typing in J Gang in the search bar. Find it. Here's the playlist. They all are in here as well. There's where you can find the. Today we're continuing on Foundations of Leninism, Chapter 3, Theory. From this theme, I take 3 questions. The importance of theory for the proletarian movement. B. Criticism of the theory of spontaneity. And C. Theory of the proletarian revolution. 1. Importance of theory. Some think that Leninism is the precedence of practice over theory, in the sense that its main point is the translation of the Marxist deeds, their execution. As for theory, it is alleged that Leninism is rather unconcerned about it. We know that Plekhanov, time and again, chaffed Lenin about his unconcern for theory, and particularly for philosophy. We also know that theory is not held in great favor by many present-day Leninist practical workers, particularly in the view of the immense amount of practical work imposed upon them by the situation. I must declare that this is more than an odd opinion about Lenin, and Leninism is quite wrong and bears no relation whatever to the truth. That the attempt of practical workers to brush theory aside runs counter to the whole spirit of Leninism and is fraught with serious dangers to work. Theory is the experience of the working class movement in all countries, taken in its general aspect. Of course, theory becomes purposeless if it is not connected with revolutionary practice. MWM. just as practice gropes in the dark if it is not illuminated by revolutionary theory. Anarchist. But theory can become a tremendous force of the working class movement if it is built up in indissoluble connection with revolutionary practice. For theory, and theory alone, can give the movement confidence, the power of orientation, and an understanding of the interrelation of surrounding events. For it, and it alone, can help practice to realize
the revolution that feeds the children gets my support.
Not only how and in which direction classes are moving at the present time, but also how and in which direction they will move in the near future.
Long live the People's Revolution!
None other than Lenin uttered and repeated scores of times the well-known thesis that, quote, without a revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. Hey, Lasu, good morning, good morning. Lenin, better than anyone else, understood the great importance of theory, particularly for a party such as ours, in view of the vanguard fighter of the international proletariat, which has fallen to its lot, and in view of the complicated internal and international situation in which it finds itself. Foreseeing the special role of our party as far back as 1902, thought it necessary even then to point out that, quote, the role of vanguard fighter can be fulfilled only by a party that is guided by the most advanced theory, end quote. Make sure you're all following La Su, by the way. Fill in that heart at the top of your screen right now. Give our dear comrade La Su a follow. Good morning. Welcome in, comrade. Great to see you. Reading a work from Joseph Stalin right now. Big scary Stalin. Hello. It scarcely needs proof that now, when Lenin's prediction about the role of our party has come true, this thesis of Lenin's acquires special force and special importance. Perhaps the most striking expression of the great importance which Lenin attached to theory is the fact that none other than Lenin undertook the very serious task of generalizing the basis of materialist philosophy, most important achievements of science from the time of Engels down to his time, as well as of subjecting to comprehensive criticism anti-materialistic trends among Marxists. Engels said that materialism must assume a new aspect with every great new discovery. It is well known that none other than Lenin accomplished this task for his own time in his remarkable work, Materialism and Empirio-Criticism. It is well known that Plekhanov, who loved to chaff Lenin about his unconcern for philosophy, did not even dare to make a serious attempt to undertake such a task. 2. The criticism of the theory of spontaneity or the role of the vanguard in the movement. The quote-unquote theory of spontaneity is a theory of opportunism, a theory of worshipping the spontaneity of the labor movement, a theory which actually repudiates the leading role of the vanguard of the working class, of the party, of the working class. Theory of worshipping spontaneity is decidedly opposed to the revolutionary character of the working class movement. It is opposed to the movement taking the line of struggle against the foundations of capitalism. It is in favor of the movement proceeding exclusively along the line of realizable demands, acceptable to capitalism. It is wholly in favor of the line of least resistance. Theory of spontaneity is the ideology of trade union. The theory of worshipping spontaneity is decidedly opposed to giving the spontaneous movement a politically conscious, planned character. It is opposed to the party marching at the head of the working class, to the party raising the masses to the level of political consciousness, to the party leading the movement. It is in favor of the politically conscious elements of the movement, not hindering the movement from taking its own course. It is in favor of the party only heeding the spontaneous movement and dragging at the tail of it. theory of spontaneity in the theory of belittling the role of the conscious element in the movement, ideology of Kotvism, the logical basis of all opportunity. In practice, this theory, which appeared on the scene even before the first revolution in Russia, led its adherents to the so-called economists deny the need for an independent workers' class party in Russia, to oppose the revolutionary struggle of the working class for the overthrow of Tsarism, to preach a purely trade unionist policy movement, and in general, to render the labor movement the hegemony of the liberal bourgeoisie. The fight of the old Iskra and the brilliant criticism of the theory Kotvism in Lenin's pamphlet What is to be Done not only smashed so-called economism, but also created the theoretical foundations for a truly revolutionary movement of the Russian working class. Without this fight, it would have been quite useless even to think of creating an independent workers' party in Russia, and of its playing a leading part in the revolution. But the theory of worshipping spontaneity is not an exclusively Russian phenomenon. It is extremely widespread in somewhat different form. It is true in all parties of the Second International, without exception. I have in mind the so-called productive forces theory as debased by the leaders of the Second International, which justifies everything and consolates everybody, which records facts and explains them after everyone has become sick and tired of them, and, having recorded them, rests content. Marx said that the materialist theory could not confine itself to explaining the world, that it must also change it. But Kautsky and company are not concerned with this. They prefer to rest content, the first part of Marx's formula. Here is one of the numerous examples of the application of this theory. It is said that before the imperialist war, the parties of the Second International threatened to declare war against war if the imperialists start a war. It is said that on the very eve of the war, these parties pigeonholed the war against war slogan and applied an opposite one, viz. War for the imperialist fatherland, quote unquote. It is said that as a result of this change of slogans, millions of workers were sent to their death. But it would be a mistake to think that there were some people to blame for this, that someone was unfaithful to the working class or betrayed it. Not at all. Everything happened as it should have happened. Firstly, because the International is an instrument of peace and not of war. Secondly, because in the view of the level of productive forces, which then prevailed, nothing else could be done. Productive forces are to blame. That is precise explanation vouchsafed to us by Mr. Kautsky, by his theory of productive forces. And whoever does not believe in that theory is not a Marxist. Role of the parties? Their importance for the movement? But what can a party do against so decisive a factor as the level of productive forces? One could cite a host of similar examples of the falsification of Marxism. It scarcely needs proof that this spurious Marxism, designed to hide the nakedness of opportunism, is merely a European variety of the self-same theory of Kotvism, which Lenin fought even before the First Russian Revolution. Scarcely needs proof that the demolition of this theoretical falsification is a preliminary condition for the creation of truly revolutionary parties in the West. And 3. The theory of proletarian revolution. Lenin's theory of proletarian revolution proceeds from 3 fundamental theses. First thesis: domination of finance capital in advanced capitalist countries. Issue of stocks and bonds is one of the principal operations of finance capital. Export of capital to the sources of raw materials, which is one of the foundations of imperialism. The omnipotence of a financial oligarchy, which is the result of the domination of finance capital. All this reveals the grossly parasitic character of monopolistic capitalism. Makes the yoke of the capitalist trusts and syndicates 100 times more burdensome, intensifies the indignation of the working class, the foundations of capitalism, and brings the masses to the proletarian revolution as their only salvation. See Lenin, Imperialism. Hence the first conclusion. Intensification of the revolutionary crisis within the capitalist countries and growth of the elements of the explosion internal proletarian front and metropolis. Second thesis. Increase export of capital to the colonies and dependent countries. The expansion of the spheres of influence and colonial possessions until they cover the whole globe. Transformation of capitalism into a world system of financial enslavement and colonial oppression of the vast majority of the population of the world by a handful of advanced, quote-unquote, countries. All this has, on one hand, converted the separate national economies and national territories into links in a single chain called world economy, and, on the other hand, split the population of the globe into two camps. A handful of advanced capitalist countries which exploit and oppress vast colonies and dependencies, and the huge majority consisting of colonial and dependent countries, which are compelled to wage a struggle for liberation from the imperialist yoke. Again, imperialism. Hey Kay, welcome in, comrade. Great to see you here. Get you a shout out in just a second if we have no mods available. If we have a mod available, please shout out to Kay. Hence the second conclusion. Intensification of the revolutionary crisis, the colonial countries, and the growth of the elements of revolt against imperialism on the external colonial front. Hey, welcome in, Unelectable. Great to see you, Matt. We're just reading Foundations of Leninism. And we're about to spladle Noah spouting this bullshit. We'll do that. We'll do that. Make sure you go learn with Kay, though. Make sure you're following Kay. How do you say? Very, very fantastic person to follow. And get one for Unelectable too whenever the cooldown is over. Third thesis. The monopolistic possession of spheres of influence and colonies, an uneven development of the capitalist countries leading to a frenzied struggle for the redivision of the world between the countries which have already seized territories and those claiming their share. Imperialist wars as the only means of restoring the disturbed equilibrium. All this leads to the intensification of the struggle on the third front, intercapitalist front, weakens imperialism and facilitates the union of the first two fronts against imperialism. The front of the revolutionary proletariat, the front of colonial emancipation. By the way, this second part, the front of colonial emancipation, is the one which I constantly am telling you that Midwestern Marx and Noah totally ignore. Which, you know, we will get to today because Noah sent a silly letter and I used it to, I'm using it to demonstrate some opportunism. And we'll just have a laugh at how much these fucking clowns are literally just like katana owning, fedora wearing fucking incels. But anyway, I'm not supposed to. Hence the third conclusion, that under imperialism, wars cannot be averted, and that a coalition between proletarian revolution in Europe and the colonial revolution in the East, united world front of revolution against the world front of imperialism, is inevitable. Lenin combines all the conclusions into one general conclusion that imperialism, eve of socialist revolution. Make sure you are following Unelectable, by the way. It's the home for all your evening, middle of the night crank communism. You're following your comrades. Hey, Comrade Bobby, welcome in. Is this the Stalin I've been hearing so much about? Yes. We do actual Stalinism in here, Comrade Bobby. Unlike those pretenders at the Midwestern Marx Institute who wouldn't know Stalinism if Stalin came up and smacked them on their asses. They would know Stalin if he bent them over his knee and spanked them for being so fucking dogmatic. The very approach to the question of the proletarian revolution. Pat's he would. I don't think he would. He wouldn't necessarily, because I mean that plays too much into the Stalin being, the monster, the murderous monster. I don't like to play too much into that hand. I think instead they would be subject to some serious re-education. And like I'm not saying that gulags are for everybody. I'm just saying that some people definitely would benefit from a re-education camp. And if we wanted to call that a gulag, then so be it. They would be victims of communism. TM. Homework would be assigned at the very least. Yeah. That would be the first step, right? We let them educate themselves. Trotz when asked for a definition of Stalinism. Well, you see, well, we talk about that a lot, Red Pandemonium. Of course, the reason why they can never answer that is because the reason Trotsky hated Stalin was because he was a colonized guy. He was from a colonized colony of Russian Tsarism. And you see, Trotsky, he was from Ukraine, which was the much more civilized West in the eyes of many Russians, right? Uh, Especially these Western Ukrainians who saw themselves as civilized Russians and people from colonized countries as being, well, inferior to them. So whether or not, and this is one thing I point out about Khrushchev and Trotsky, right? They weren't like Khrushchev wasn't necessarily a Trotskyist, but he did share that same disdain of colonized people that Trotsky shared, and he shared it towards Stalin as well, which is, I think, what compelled Khrushchev to parrot so many lies about Stalin, but he did it in secret. And the reason he did it in secret is because he knew anybody who actually like was alive and paying attention during Stalin's time would never have believed that. So it was like a gift to the future imperialist and the future bourgeoisie, essentially. Literacy is authoritarian. Yeah. Yeah, well, what can I say? If you want and this is the thing we got to reckon with. If you want to be able to re-educate fascists and suppress bourgeois interests from re-emerging as the dominant force of society, unfortunately, the working class gonna have to wield some authority. And anarchists are free to reframe that and redefine that as being actually not authority but anti-authority all they want. But the reality is the rest of the world will still recognize that as authority, including their enemies. And we're just going to have to reckon with the fact that they will call it authority and say, fine, call it what you will, but that's not going to stop us from having our revolution. That's not going to stop us from ending capitalism. Sorry that you don't like the word. All right, Mama, have a good day. Hope you have a great day, comrade. Have these gentlemen not seen a revolution? Exactly. The very approach to the question of proletarian revolution, or the character of the revolution, of its scope, of its depth, the scheme of the revolution in general, changes accordingly. Make sure you're following Mama, too. Formerly, the analysis of the prerequisites for the proletarian revolution was usually approached from the point of view of the economic state of individual countries. Now, This approach is no longer adequate. Now the matter must be approached from the point of view of the economic state of all or the majority of countries, from the point of view of the state of the world economy. For individual countries and individual national economies cease to be a self-sufficient unit. They have become links in a single chain called world economy. For the old cultured capitalism has evolved into imperialism, and imperialism is a world system of financial enslavement and colonial oppression of the vast majority of the population of the world by a handful of advanced countries. Formerly, it was the accepted thing to speak of the existence or absence of objective conditions for the proletarian revolution in individual countries, or, to be more precise, in one or another developed countries. Now, this point of view is no longer adequate. Now we want to speak of the existence of objective conditions for the revolution in the entire system of world imperialist economy as an integral whole. The existence within this system of some countries that are not sufficiently developed industrially cannot serve as an insuperable obstacle to the revolution. If the system as a whole, or more correctly, because the system as a whole is already ripe for revolution. Formerly, it was the accepted thing to speak of the existence. Oh, wait, I just read that one. We're right here. Formerly, it was the accepted thing to speak of the proletarian revolution in one or another developed country as of a separate and self sufficient entity opposing a separate national front of capital as its antipode. Now, the point of view is no longer adequate. Now we must speak of the world proletarian revolution, for the separate national fronts of capital become links in a single chain called the world front of imperialism, which must be opposed by a common front of the revolutionary movement in all countries. Formerly, proletarian revolution was regarded exclusively as the result of the internal development of a given country. Now, this point of view is no longer adequate. Now, the proletarian revolution must be regarded primarily as the result of the development of the contradictions within the world system of imperialism, as a result of the breaking of the chain of world imperialist front in one country or another. And again, this is the failure that Midwestern Marx constantly makes. They do the old opportunist version of only examining. They talk about imperialism, but when they talk about U.S., they do it in a way that is divorced from other countries around it. For example, the way they talk about the American Revolution as being an anti-colonial struggle against British imperialism or British colonialism. That's false. And what is that? That's doing exactly what Stalin is telling you not to do here. Because the fact of the matter is the US was never a feudal country. Therefore, it never had a revolution that changed feudalism into capitalism. Never had that type of revolution because the US was always set up as a capitalist country. And the failure to recognize that is exactly failing to recognize the dialectical relationship of imperialism and dependent colonies. Formally, where would the revolution begin? Where, in what country, can the front of capital be pierced first? Where industry is more developed? Where the proletarian constitutes the majority? Where the proletariat constitutes the majority? Where there is more culture? Where there is more democracy? That was the reply usually given formally. But feudalism is one king. Yeah, And again, that it just speaks to the absolute mechanical, the mechanical aspects of their analyses, right? How they're completely lost in dogmatism. No, objects the Leninist theory of revolution. Not necessarily where industry is more developed. And so forth. The front of capital will be pierced where the chain of imperialism is weakest. The proletarian revolution is the result of breaking of the chain of the world imperialist front at its weakest link. And it may turn out that the country which has started the revolution, which has made a breach in the front of capital, is less developed in a capitalist sense than other, more developed countries have, however, remained within the framework of capitalism. Now, I have pointed out as well, though, that I think that this analysis as well, that the idea that this is indeed where the chain of imperialism is weakest, is indeed a factor. But I think that actually DPRK further corrects this idea with Juche by telling us that even in the most unfavorable circumstances, revolution can break out and revolution can win. If the revolutionary enthusiasm and consciousness of the masses are raised to a sufficient degree. And even places where imperialism is focused and fighting a literal battle can be overthrown, like in Korea, like in Vietnam, right? I think that that is an important development that kind of shows that, yes, Lenin's thesis about where the chain of imperialism is the weakest does play a factor, but it's not the deciding factor where revolution will occur. That's the most important thing we have to understand. The deciding factor, the people, the masses, right? Where they are at. And that same factor is the thing that has prevented revolution from breaking out in the advanced capitalist countries. Where, if you think about it, in some aspects, the chain of imperialism is actually quite weak because they're focused on securing their imperialist treasures, if you will. Like the right kind of like united efforts that could span across Canada and the United States could cause some serious disruption, especially if we can link that to the global south as well, to actions there, and say disrupt the supply chain all along the course of it. In 1917, the chain of imperialist world front proved to be weaker in Russia than in other countries. It was there that the chain broke and provided an outlet for the proletarian revolution. Why? Because in Russia, a great popular revolution was unfolding. And that the revolutionary enthusiasm I was just talking about, and at its head marched the revolutionary proletariat, which had such an important ally as the vast mass of the peasantry, which was oppressed and exploited by landlords. Because the revolution there was opposed by such a hideous representative of imperialism as Tsarism, which lacked all moral prestige and was deservedly hated by the whole population. Spain proved to be weaker in Russia, although Russia was less developed in a capitalist sense than, say, France, Germany, Britain, or America. Yeah, at the end of the day, there are multiple factors that can lead to revolution, but at the end of the day, you need an organization of the people. And the most important thing is like the revolutionary consciousness, aka correct theory and practice, that can even overcome a place where the chain of imperialism is very strong and revolution can win, which is what Korea explains happens with them. And that for them, the chain of imperialism wasn't weak there, because actually imperialism was quite focused on Korea, because it was there that it was disarming the Japanese, it was disarming Japan, and trying to fight kind of like a covert battle against the Soviet Union at the same time. Will the chain break in the future? Again, where it is weakest. it is not precluded that the chain may break, say, in India. Why? Because that country has a young, militant, revolutionary proletariat, which has such an ally as the National Liberation Movement, an undoubtedly powerful and undoubtedly important ally. Because there, the revolution is confronted by such a well known foe as foreign imperialism, which has no moral credit and is deservedly hated by all the oppressed and exploited masses in India. What prevented all of India from winning revolution? Think about the capturing of especially upper castes by the reactionary ideology represented by the likes of like Gandhi, for example. It is also quite possible that the chain will break in Germany. Why? Because the factors which are operating, say, in India are beginning to operate in Germany as well. But of course, the enormous difference in the level of development between India and Germany cannot but stamp its imprint on the progress and outcome of the revolution in Germany. The International Congress you're talking about the party. It just basic. I mean, that they also obviously played a role in it as well. But yeah, the whole and Gandhi, the Indian National Congress, all these things really influence upper caste members in India who fought against an actual revolution winning there. So again, several factors, but again, India being the weakest chain of imperialism didn't see revolution win there because again of people's consciousness, because people's revolutionary enthusiasm, which again was captured by the likes of the Indian National Congress, by the likes of Gandhi, by this pacifist movement, and which upper caste people in India were compelled to sort of unite behind against actual revolutionary demands and struggle. And these are the kind of like intersectional questions again that the likes of Midwestern Marx totally overlook, which is also quite possible that the chain. Oh, set up with this one. Lenin said that, quote, the West European capitalist countries will consummate their development towards socialism, not by the even maturing of socialism in them, but by the exploitation of some countries by the other, by the exploitation of the first of the countries to be vanquished in the imperialist war, combined with the exploitation of the whole of the East. On the other hand, precisely as the result of the first imperialist war, the East has definitely come into revolutionary movement, has been definitely drawn into the general maelstrom of the world revolutionary movement. Communists were a force, but not a strong enough force, what I know. So it was reduced to electoral force. Yeah. Yeah. South Africa. Yep. Which is how you, and this is what the EFF is fighting against the remnants of today. Which is why the EFF's position is that apartheid never ended, it just changed forms, right? Briefly, the chain of the imperialist front must, as a rule, break where the links are weaker, and at all events, not necessarily where capitalism is more developed, where there is such and such a percentage of proletarians and such a percentage of peasants, so on. That is why, in deciding the question of proletarian revolution, statistical estimates of the percentage of the proletarian population in a given country lose the exceptional importance, so eagerly attached to them by the doctrinaires of the Second International, who have not understood imperialism and who fear revolution like the plague. Proceed. The heroes of the Second International asserted, and continue to assert, that between the bourgeois democratic revolution and the proletarian revolution, there is a chasm, or at any rate, a Chinese wall, separating one from the other by a more or less protracted interval of time, during which the bourgeoisie, having come to power, develops capitalism while the proletariat accumulates strength and prepares for the decisive struggle against capitalism. This interval is usually calculated to extend over many decades, if not longer. It scarcely needs proof that this Chinese wall theory is totally devoid of scientific meaning under the conditions of imperialism, that it is and can only be a means of concealing and camouflaging the counter-revolutionary aspirations of the bourgeoisie. Scarcely needs proof that under the conditions of imperialism, fraught as it is with the collisions of wars, under the conditions of the eve of the socialist revolution, when flourishing capitalism has become moribund capitalism, Lenin and the revolutionary movement is growing in all countries of the world. When imperialism is allying itself with all reactionary forces without exception, down to and including Tsarism and serfdom, thus making imperative the coalition of all revolutionary forces. From the proletarian movement of the West to the national liberation movement of the East, and the overthrow of the survivals of the regime of feudal serfdom becomes impossible without a revolutionary struggle against imperialism, it scarcely needs proof that the bourgeois democratic revolution in a more of less developed countries must, under such circumstances, verge upon the proletarian revolution. The former pass into the latter. History of the revolution in Russia provided palpable proof that this thesis is correct and incontrovertible. It is not without reason that Lenin, as far back as 1905, on the eve of the First Russian Revolution, in his pamphlet Two Tactics, depicted the bourgeois democratic revolution, the socialist revolution, as two links in the same chain, as a single and integral picture of the sweep of the Russian Revolution. Red Falcon, thanks for those cartwheels. Very much appreciated that. And here's a quote from Lenin here. We're about to get into some cursed Patsock bullshit, just to warn you. Quote, the proletariat must carry to completion the democratic revolution by allying to itself the mass of the peasantry in order to crush by force the resistance of the autocracy and to paralyze the instability of the bourgeoisie. Proletariat must accomplish the socialist revolution by allying to itself the mass of the semi-proletarian elements of the population in order to crush by force the resistance of the bourgeoisie and to paralyze the instability of the peasantry and the petty bourgeoisie. Such are the tasks of the proletariat, which the new Iskraists present so narrowly in all their arguments and resolutions about the sweep of the revolution. See Lenin. See Lenin. And see Red Falcon. Everybody go give Falcon a follow. Should definitely be watching Red Falcon for non-reactionary gaming content. Thank you and have a good day. There is no need to mention other, later works of Lenin, in which the idea of the bourgeoisie revolution passing into the proletarian revolution stands out in greater relief than in Two Tactics, as one of the cornerstones of Leninist theory of revolution. Some comrades believe, it seems, that Lenin arrived at this idea only in 1916, that up until that time he had thought that the revolution in Russia would remain within the bourgeois framework, that power, consequently, would pass from the hands of the organ of the dictatorship of the proletariat and peasantry into the hands of the bourgeoisie, and not of the proletariat. It is said that this assertion has even penetrated into our communist press. I must say that this assertion is absolutely wrong, that it is totally at variance with the facts. I might refer to Lenin's well-known speech at the Third Congress of the Party, 1905, in which he defined the dictatorship of the proletariat and peasantry, i.e., the victory of the democratic revolution, not as an organization of order, but as an organization of war. Further, I might refer to Lenin's well-known articles on a provisional government, also 1905, where outlining the prospects of the unfolding Russian Revolution, he assigns to the party the task of ensuring that the Russian Revolution is not a movement of a few months, but a movement of many years, that it leads not merely to slight concessions on the part of the powers that be, but to the complete overthrow of those powers. Where enlarging further on those prospects and linking them with the revolution in Europe, he goes on to say, quote, "And if we succeed in doing that, then the revolutionary conflagration will spread all over Europe. The European worker, languishing under bourgeois reaction, will rise in his turn and will show us how it is done. Then the revolutionary wave in Europe will sweep back again into Russia, and will convert an epoch of a few revolutionary years to an epoch of several revolutionary decades." I might refer to the well-known article by Lenin published in November 1915, in which he writes, quote, "Proletariat is fighting, and will fight valiantly, to capture power for a republic, for the confiscation of the land, for the participation of the non-proletarian masses of the people, in liberating bourgeois Russia from military feudal imperialism, Tsarism. And the proletariat will immediately take advantage of this liberation of bourgeois Russia from Tsarism, from the agrarian power of the landlords, not to aid the rich peasants in their struggle against the rural worker, but to bring about the socialist revolution in alliance with the proletarians of Europe." Finally, I might refer to the well-known passage in Lenin's pamphlet, Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky, where, referring to the above-quoted passage in Tactics, the sweep of the Russian Revolution, he arrives at the following conclusion. Things turned out just as I said they would. The course taken by the revolution confirmed the correctness of our reasoning. First, with the whole of the peasantry against the monarchy, against the landlords, against the medieval regime. And to that extent, the revolution remains bourgeois democratic. Then, with the poor peasants and the semi-proletarians, with all the exploited against capitalism, including the rural rich, the kulaks, the profiteers, and to that extent, the revolution becomes a socialist. To attempt to raise an artificial Chinese wall between the first and second, and separate them by anything else than degrees of preparedness of the proletariat, and the degree of the unity with the poor peasants, means monstrously to distort Marxism, to vulgarize it, to replace it by liberalism. That is sufficient, I think. Very well, we may be told, but if that is the case, why did Lenin combat the idea of permanent, uninterrupted revolution? Because Lenin proposed that the revolutionary capacities of the peasantry be exhausted, and that the fullest use be made of their revolutionary energy for the complete liquidation of Tsarism, for the transition to the proletarian revolution, whereas the adherents of permanent revolution did not understand the important role of the peasantry in the Russian Revolution, underestimated the strength of the revolutionary energy of the peasantry, underestimated the strength and ability of the Russian proletariat to lead the peasantry, and thereby hampered the work of emancipating the peasantry from the influence of the bourgeois, the work of rallying the peasantry around the proletariat. Because Lenin proposed that the revolution be crowned with the transfer of power to the proletariat, whereas the adherents of permanent revolution wanted to begin at once with the establishment of the power of the proletariat, failing to realize that in doing so, they were closing their eyes to such minor detail as the survivals of serfdom, for leaving out of account so important a force as the Russian peasantry, failing to understand that such a policy could only retard the winning of the peasantry over to the side of the proletariat. Now, this actually has a relation in the Patsocks and their anti-land back attitudes, believe it or not, because they actually make a very similar mistake. The Patsocks as well make the mistake of thinking that they can begin at once with the establishment of the proletariat here in Canada or the US, where there is a settler colonial entity continuing a genocide of hundreds of First Nations. So what they are ignoring the stages which revolution is carried out. They are ignoring that and much like those permanent revolutionists in Russia ignored the powerful role of the Russian peasantry, they ignore the powerful role of the native people, who are largely, in reality, as part of the proletariat or lumpen proletariat. However, with a much more heightened revolutionary consciousness that is less likely to be bribed by the bourgeoisie. So in much the same way as Trotsky's mistakes, these Patsocks make the same mistakes today regarding thinking that we can just take proletarian power without first getting rid of settler colonial genocide. Second. Sorry about that. Just had to check on Bugs. She was being unusually quiet. Just tired. Okay, so yeah. So anyway, this is very much a relation to the Patsocks and the type of distortions and deviations of Marxism that they are doing today. Consequently, Lenin fought the adherents of permanent revolution, not over the question of uninterruptedness, for Lenin himself maintained the point of view of uninterrupted revolution, but because they underestimated the role of the peasantry, which is an enormous reserve of the proletariat, because they failed to understand the idea of the hegemony of the proletariat. The idea of permanent revolution should not be regarded as the new idea. It was first advanced by Marx at the end of the 40s in his well-known address to the Communist League, 1850. It is from this document that our permanentists took the idea of uninterrupted revolution. It should be noted that in taking it from Marx, our permanentists altered it somewhat, and in altering it, spoilt it, and made it unfit for practical use. The experienced hand of Lenin was needed to rectify this mistake, to take Marx's idea of uninterrupted revolution in its pure form and make it a cornerstone of his theory of revolution. Here is what Marx says in the address about uninterrupted revolution, after enumerating a number of revolutionary democratic demands which he calls upon the communists to win. Quote, while the democratic petty bourgeois wish to bring the revolution to conclusion as quickly as possible, and with the achievement at most of the above demands, it is our interest and our task to make the revolution permanent, until all more or less possessing classes have been forced out of their position of dominance, until the proletariat has conquered state power. The association of proletarians, not only in one country, but in all the dominant countries of the world, has advanced so far that competition among the proletarians of these countries has ceased, and that at least the decisive productive forces are concentrated in the hands of the proletarians. In other words, A. Marx did not at all propose to begin the revolution in Germany of the 50s with the immediate establishment of proletarian power, contrary to the plans of our Russian permanentists. B. Marx proposed only that the revolution be crowned with the establishment of proletarian state power, by hurling, step by step, one section of the bourgeoisie after another from the heights of power, in order, after the attainment of power by the proletariat, to kindle the fire of revolution in every country. And everything that Lenin taught and carried out in the course of our revolution in pursuit of his theory of the proletarian revolution under the conditions of imperialism, fully in line with that proposition. It follows then that our Russian permanentists have not only underestimated the role of the peasantry in the Russian Revolution and the importance of the idea of the hegemony of the proletariat, but have altered, for worse, the idea of permanent revolution, made it unfit for practical use. That is why Lenin ridiculed the theory of our permanentists, calling it original and fine, and accusing them of refusing to think why for 10 whole years life has passed by this fine theory. That is why Lenin regarded this theory as a semi-Menshevik theory, and said that it borrows from the Bolsheviks their call for a resolute revolutionary struggle of the proletariat, and the conquest of political power by the latter, and from the Mensheviks the repudiation of the role of the peasantry. This, then, is the position in regard to Lenin's idea of the bourgeois democratic revolution, passing into the proletarian revolution, of utilizing the bourgeois revolution for the immediate transition to the proletarian revolution. To proceed, formally, the victory of the revolution in one country was considered impossible, on the assumption that it would require the combined actions of the proletarians of all, or at least of a majority of the advanced countries, to achieve victory over the bourgeoisie. Now, this point of view no longer fits in with the facts. Now we must proceed from the possibility of such a victory, for the uneven and spasmodic character of the development of the various capitalist countries under the conditions of imperialism, the development within imperialism of catastrophic conditions leading to inevitable wars, the growth of revolutionary movement in all countries of the world. All this leads not only to the possibility, but also the necessity of the victory of the proletariat in individual countries. History of the revolution in Russia is direct proof of this. At the same time, however, it must be borne in mind that the overthrow of the bourgeoisie can be successfully accomplished only when certain absolutely necessary conditions exist, the absence of which there can be even no question of the proletariat taking power. Here is what Lenin says about these conditions in his pamphlet, Left-Wing Communism. Quote, "The fundamental law of revolution, which has been confirmed by all revolutions, and particularly by the 3 Russian revolutions of the 20th century, is as follows. It is not enough for revolution that the exploited and oppressed masses should understand the impossibility of living in the old way and demand changes. It is essential for revolution that the exploiters should not be able to live and rule in the old way. Only when the lower classes do not want the old way, and when the upper classes cannot carry on in the old way, only then can revolution triumph. This truth may be expressed in other words. Revolution is impossible without a nationwide crisis, affecting both the exploited and the exploiters. It follows that for revolution, it is essential, first, that a majority of the workers, or at least a majority of the class-conscious, thinking, politically active workers, this part is more important, should fully understand that revolution is necessary and be ready to sacrifice their lives for it. Secondly, that the ruling class should be passing through a governmental crisis, which draws even the most backward masses into politics, weakens the government, and makes it possible for revolutionaries to overthrow it rapidly. But the overthrow of the power of the bourgeoisie the establishment of the power of the proletariat in one country does not yet mean the complete victory of socialism has been ensured. After consolidating its power and leading the peasantry in the wake of the proletarian of the victorious country, can and must build a socialist society. Does this mean that it will thereby achieve the complete and final victory of socialism? I.e., does it mean that with the forces of only one country it can finally consolidate socialism and fully guarantee that country against intervention and consequently also against restoration? No, it does not. For this, the victory of the revolution in at least several countries is needed. Therefore, the development and support of the revolution in other countries is an essential task of the victorious revolution. Therefore, the revolution in other countries is an essential task of the victorious revolution. Therefore, revolution which has been victorious in one country must regard itself not as a self-sufficient entity, but as an aid, as a means for hastening the victory of the proletariat in other countries. Lenin expressed this thought succinctly when he said that the task of the victorious revolution is to do the utmost possible, in one country for the development, support, and awakening of the revolution in all countries. Why DPRK publishes and makes all of their works available to everybody. This is why they hold talks teaching other people about the Juche idea and so on, because of exactly this. These, in general, are the characteristic features of Lenin's theory of the proletarian revolution. That I missed that was important. So, nothing that was really unexplained. Okay, there you go. Chapter 3. Foundations of Leninism complete. Hell yeah. So next up, we got Chapter 4. The Dictatorship of the Proletariat. Okay, yeah, sure, but how can this guy be so sure he knows what Lenin thought? Because him and Lenin were tight. Perhaps even... I'm not going to speculate on that. But perhaps even tighter than next to each other. I'll just say. But all dictatorships are bad. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Before we go on, I just want to mention that, hey, if you haven't... I'll mention two things, actually. First, hey, if you haven't joined our Discord, you should think about joining our Discord. It's a fantastic place. You can give me content suggestions. You can hang out with other comrades. You can get tech support for working on your computers. If Bup was here, he would be able to tell you that thanks to the Red Star and Vanguard Discord, we literally got Bup's computer working again and able to play video games with the other comrades. Fridays we watch Trailer Park Boys. Sundays we watch cartoons. And it's a great place to find other comrades to play games with and to learn theory with as well. The Discord is also the home of the Juche gang. If you do join the Discord, just make sure you realize that we have a ticket system in our Discord, which means when you join in, just click copy, create a ticket, and then you can just answer the questions that are in the ticket, and a mod will allow you in. We just have that as a security measure because it's a pretty big Discord. It's been around for many years, and we don't want to have a bunch of trolls, you know? It's a way to help make the Discord actually better for you, people who actually want to be in the Discord, because it keeps trolls out and people from like other communities who aren't really there to participate in the community. And there's nothing wrong with lurking, but there's a difference between the type of people who are like looking for out of context shit to clip to other people, like in other anti-communist communities, and people who are just generally there learning and lurking and all that stuff, and we welcome that, of course. It's a great community. Join the Discord. Also, I will say, if you haven't already, if you're new here, haven't subscribed to my channel, you should think about subscribing to my channel. There were some funny applications, yeah. I mean, to be fair, March, the funny applications still do come up. They're just not as visible for everybody else now, I guess. And yeah, make sure you subscribe here if you haven't already. It's a way you can support my work if you like what I do here. You literally keep me going. I do now. One thing I do is I do every hour we do 3 minutes of ads. So subscribing also prevents you from seeing the advertisements. The reason I do that is so that there's no pre-roll ads. So if I did anything less than that, that would mean that whenever somebody wants to come in and watch the stream, they're getting they're getting these yeah, doo-doo. You heard me.
It's all for one motherfucker and one motherfucker for all motherfuckers everywhere. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you so much for getting us started today with that gift subby. Oh, and by the way, gift sub, the best way to contribute, by the way,